Good afternoon and welcome to Dog Talk. I'm Dan Camilleri.
And I'm Laura McKillop. We'd like to start by thanking Duro for their ongoing support with bringing you our live weekly Q&As. Tonight we're fortunate enough to be speaking with Chris Stapleton from Capri Stud.
Chris will be picking who he thinks has asked the best question of the night, and they will win a bag of Enduro Plus, high energy food for working dogs with real kangaroo meat.
Evening, Chris. How are you going?
Yeah, good evening. Good evening, everyone.
How's your day been, mate?
It's been pretty easy today. I've had a bit of a slack day.
That's good to hear.
So tell us a bit about yourself.
I'm a farmer. Got a property at Newbridge between Blaney and Bathurst, and I run pole merinos and Angus cattle and breed a few dogs on the side. I've had a connection with dogs since I was very young, and broke my first dog in when I was about 8, I reckon, and I've had a continuous connection with dogs, and especially Kelpie, since then.
What was that first dog, mate?
He was a dog. It's not politically correct these days, but his name was Nigger.
Yeah, right, yeah.
He was a pup that a drover had given me, and he was a useful dog. I didn't know too much about training dogs at that age, and but he turned out to be quite a useful dog. So we learned.
Was he a Kelpie?
He was a crossbred Kelpie, a long-haired black dog, and pretty lovely natured dog, but he didn't have a lot of natural ability. He didn't have a lot of class, let's put it that way, but he had a lot of enthusiasm.
So have you always been around that area?
Yeah, I have. I was originally came from just about 50 kilometres away, and I've lived and worked and owned land sort of in this area all my life.
Tell us a bit about the country that you're working on, and does it require a particular type of dog?
The country that I have now is very easy compared to what I grew up on, which was Abercrombie Hills, very steep and a lot of timbered country, and the sheep were pretty wild and hard to muster and things. And so I grew up with a need for dogs that could work hilly country, and and still do. We ran quite a few cattle as I developed the place, and so I needed dogs that could do mustering work, sheep and cattle, and I always liked a dog that could do everything. I liked the dog that could work cattle, work sheep, work the yard, work the paddock, and I always aimed to try and breed that type of dog. So but these days with my place here at Newbridge, it's smaller paddocks and not so steep, and makes life a bit easier, and I don't need quite that the type of dog I needed when I was down there. But I still like a good dog that thinks for himself and can do the job.
And in Abercrombie and where you are now, mate, they'd have to handle the cold pretty well as well.
Oh yeah, it's even where I lived when we had country and I managed the property down there. It was actually much warmer than it is here. When we moved over to Newbridge, it's quite a bit higher and a fair bit colder.
How do they go those early snowy mornings, mate? They get up all right? Get into it?
They get up better than I do.
So your passion, you said you trained dogs, so you got your first dog at 8. Where did your passion for livestock come from?
I always never ever wanted to be anything else, only a farmer.
Yep.
I can remember following my father around. He used to walk around the stock and I'd be a couple of steps behind him, and always never ever wanted to be anything else except a farmer, and always liked sheep and cattle and working livestock, and I had a real passion for dogs. So yeah, I just that grew and hasn't really changed.
Wouldn't feel like a day of work in your life then if you're enjoying it.
That's right. Yeah, I probably put in a few long days, but when you do something that you like, and yeah, it's never really been a chore to me to get up and do a day's work. I always liked what I did.
Sure, a lot of people envy that, mate.
A lot of people think I'm mad, but
Could you do your job without the dogs, do you reckon?
no, I couldn't have done. I couldn't have looked after the type of country that I looked after without dogs that could do the job. And I've always liked dogs to do the work, and not. I used to use horses a lot on the other place, and I never ever felt that I had to help the dogs. I always, if I had a task to do, I like the dogs to do it. I didn't get on the motorbike and do the work for them. I hate motorbikes. I like dogs that can do jobs that when you set a job. I like dogs that have the ability and the stamina and the want to do them. That's probably been my main criteria with my dogs. I found a couple of dogs that I really liked early when I started to breed Kelpies. I tried a lot, but I found some that I liked, and their work style and their attitude, and we got on well, and I haven't wavered from that path that I started on.
What were you looking for when you're looking for those particular dogs?
Well, I sort of, like I said, I tried a fair few Kelpies from reputable breeders, and they didn't all suit me for one reason or another. And I stumbled onto some dogs that really took my eye, and I liked their work style and liked their attitude, and so I stayed on that line, and I've stayed pretty close. Any of my dogs today, you can pick up a pedigree, and I'll have quite a few crosses of my favourite dogs there, and it's very satisfying to me today to have a litter of pups and put those pups on sheep and see traits of dogs that have been dead for 20 years, and I can see things about them, and I probably that if I've accomplished anything in dog breeding, good or bad, it's been able to maintain a line for 40 odd years of dogs that I like, and be able to put a pup on sheep and think, yeah, geez, that looks like, he works similar to that dog, and yeah, might be 25 years ago sort of thing. So
Must be it's a lot easier if you like the dog, right, to be able to get on with it.
Oh, definitely, yeah. I've a lot of people ask me who was my best dog, and best is a funny word to me.
Yeah.
I think you could count on one hand my best dogs.
Yep.
But they were sort of. I had a connection with them. I've had a lot of good dogs and a lot of talented dogs, but I didn't have a connection with them.
Yep.
I've had a few that have had, they've been. Didn't really own them. You couldn't sell them. They were sort of mates, and you had a connection with them, and they always tried their best for you. And if you went out to do a job, you were pretty confident you could get it done. Didn't matter whether it was mustering wild cattle out of pines or tagging little baby lambs and getting a dog to hold the ewe while you tagged them, or a cross section of jobs. And best to me is just those few dogs that I had the connection with.
Who were those ones that stood out for you?
Probably the first one that I had that really showed me how to work stock was Glenlogie Lucky.
Yep.
She was a beautiful dog, temperament and had a load of ability. She probably had lots of faults that other people saw that I didn't see. But to me, she encompassed three things that I've always tried to have in my dogs, and that was to be able to cover, to be able to hold and drive, and more hold and drive than that cover. The cover is tied up with that being able to drive, like hold the sheep together and drive them. That's one criteria that I really like. And the other one is, temperament. Just being able to relate to you, and it's about respect. And if a dog, to be a good work dog, he has to respect the handler, but to be a best dog, he has to like and respect you, and that's the difference. So yeah, so those dogs that I like the best, that I call my best dogs, were probably, they all had those three things. They had hold and drive,
Yep.
and they had respect, and they liked me, and I liked them. So, and they were probably Lucky and Watch and Old Boss.
Yep.
He was a great dog. He's almost human, that dog. And probably Katie and dog I've got now for Red.
Yep. And I've heard you mention before, we've spoken pretty openly before over the last few years, and you mentioned there about Boss was nearly human, and you said things like sometimes you would think something and that dog would do it before you even, or would just would make it do it.
Yeah, he's a brilliantly smart dog, that fella. During the drought, we were feeding a lot of pregnant ewes, and you'd run a trail of feed out, and they were getting down on the trail, and you'd have to go along after you'd fed them and pick the ones up that had got on their side, and he'd go along and he'd grab them gently on the top knot or the jowl and pull back on them and get them on their front feet and stand them up for you. And I've never had another dog that could do something like that. He watched me get a few up, and then he started going along in front, lifting them up for me. So yeah, no, he did some pretty special things.
That's cool, mate. We've actually got a question here from Peter Rutherford. Capri Boss is one of the most influential sires in the Kelpie breed. Can you describe what he was like and what traits he has had?
What traits he had that was so appealing to a range of breeders across paddock, yard, and cattle lines of Kelpies?
Boss, like I say, he was a special dog. He had a great ability to drive and hold his sheep at the same time. He didn't have tremendous cover, but he didn't have to. Sheep moved off him well, and he had he could work up close, and sheep moved off him well. He worked cattle well, but he was a very smart dog. He's a great mustering dog and worked goats or cattle or sheep, and you could put him in any situation. He never ever had any malice. He was never was a biter, and yeah, he's a lovely pup, very smart, and more or less was no trouble to break in, and showed a lot of qualities that I like in a dog. He ticked a lot of boxes for me.
So, do you want to tell us a little bit about the current team you've got at the moment?
Yeah, I've got my main work dogs are Red. He's a lovely dog. He's ugly as sin, but so am I. But he's just a really nice dog. The kids, he loves kids. He loves he's part of the family. All my grandkids really get on well with him, and he doesn't get tied up much. He's got his own chair at the back veranda there. Yeah, he's just a good dog. You can do any job with him, and he always gives you 100%, no matter what you try to do. He'll give you 100%. He casts well, and he can work one sheep or a mob, and yeah, works cattle well. Just a really nice dog to have around.
Got a question here from Chris Egan. It says, are you still seeing new traits in your pups, or does everything you see in them relate back to a certain dog in their pedigree?
I sometimes see some things that I don't like that I can't blame on any other dogs. But yeah, no, I my litters that I get, my special litters particularly, I can see lots of traits of my older dogs in them. I was probably lucky enough or smart enough to put some semen away from dogs like Boss and another young dog that I had called Bo, and yeah, and I've brought that back in now, and I can see traits of those old dogs that have been dead for 10 or 12 years now in these little puppies that I've got, and it's very satisfying to see them. So I really, yeah, I like to think that if you've got plenty of closely related ancestors there, and there's not too many faults in those, or what other people might call them faults, but if I've got the things that I like in plenty of close-up ancestors, I'll have a litter there that I can take any pup, and I'll be pretty happy with what I end up with.
How do you go about picking a bitch to use that semen that you've got from those particular dogs?
Yeah, because
it's just pretty worthy to you.
I haven't got much there to use, and I've had to be pretty careful about selecting dogs that I wanted to use. I used Sophie with some Boss semen, and that produced a dog called Pride that shows that he has a lot of old Bossa skills. He's not probably not as smart as Boss, but he's very stock wise. Has a lovely handle on stock. Knows how much pressure or how little pressure he needs to use, and he's very wise with it. He's, for a young dog, he's very, very complete dog, I reckon. I just wish he was in the mould of Boss in the mind, because he'd be a very good dog then. But his work skills are outstanding. His nature's good, and yeah, he was out of Sophie. I particularly thought she would suit Boss because she had plenty of footwork and cover, and Boss lacked a bit of footwork. He was a pretty big dog, and like I said, he didn't have to cover a lot because he had a lot of presence and sheep moved off him well. But Sophie had very nice footwork and strong and the right, very nice type of bitch. So that's why the pedigrees lined up pretty good, and I think Pride was that sort of proved to me that was a good way to use that semen. And I've used Pride over a couple of bitches, and I really like his progeny. They're very much in the same mould as the Boss pups were.
Yep.
Yeah, and with the other AI dog that I used was Bo, and I selected a Sophie daughter for him, and yeah, those pups look good too. I'm happy with those, and I've kept a pretty nice bitch out of that AI mating as well.
A question here from Pete Rutherford. Having been a very successful and influential Kelpie stud for several decades, what level of importance do you place on your bitch lines, and what are the most important traits you look for in a brood bitch? For example, what is it about Sophie that she has had so many quality pups to such a range of size?
Well, yeah, that's the females in any breeding program, I feel, are a very important part of any, whether you're breeding cattle or sheep or dogs or horses. But you really need to have the female has a big influence on the progeny, and that's why people ask me why I use a certain dog. You probably, might not be everybody's cup of tea, and I put him over a bitch, and people say, "Well, why would you use that dog?" And he has some little thing that I want to put in that line, and I know because Sophie's a very closely bred bitch, She goes back to all my good old dogs, and apples don't fall far from the tree. If you've got a nice tight genetic pool there with your bitches, that you can use a mongrel dog and get reasonable pups. But if you've got a bitch that's not strongly bred, and what I mean strongly bred is she doesn't have some common ancestors, good common ancestors close up in the pedigree, the chances of using an outside dog and getting predictable progeny are very slim. Did that answer your question or not?
Yeah, I'm still trying to digest it. It's something I've been thinking a lot about recently myself. So, yeah, totally makes sense. I think you actually just answered somebody else's question that come up there, because they've asked a similar question and they've just come back scratch that. So you answered a couple of questions there, mate, which is good.
Right.
So has the type of dog you look for varied from where you started?
No, one of the dog that influenced me the most to try and breed a work style like it was a dog called Barrenbogie Mac. He had the three traits that really make a dog must have to be a good dog. He had cover and hold and strength, and I was lucky enough to have an elite daughter by Mac, and that was lucky. She had those three main traits: hold, drive, and strength, and she put that into her progeny. And so I more or less used that work style and that criteria, and didn't waver from it. I've introduced plenty of outside dogs, but I've always had plenty of Mac and Lucky Blood in the close up in that pedigree, so that they didn't overshadow what I already had. So if I introduced a dog to get something, he had to have that trait, and have no dogs too close in the pedigree that I didn't like. I never use a dog that shows traits that I don't like. It wouldn't matter what he won or how good he was. If he had dogs close up in the pedigree that I didn't consider were good dogs, I wouldn't put him in my dogs.
Yeah.
So that's just the criteria that I've always had. I've always looked for traits to improve my dogs, but it's very hard to find them with a pedigree that I also approve of.
You live and breathe dogs other than family and your dragons there. Have you ever been tempted or thought about going in another direction and then went, no, that's not for me. I want to stay where I'm going?
Not really, no. I like my dogs, and I don't see any reason to. I've never ever been influenced by what other people said. I'm a bit pig-headed. So I never really cared what people said about my dogs, and I've had plenty of detractors, but that never worried me. I've always only ever bred dogs to suit myself, and I like the traits that I have in my dogs. They suit me, and I consider them what I've strived for and tried to keep that line. And like I said, 40 odd years I've been breeding those dogs, and I can look back and see traits of those dogs I started with.
You mentioned one of your traits. We've spoken about traits a lot there. And we've got a question from Carl Schubert. When talking strength, what defines strength to you?
Strength is the ability to stay in the pocket, to put it simply. When you're working livestock, there'll always be a point where the dog needs to be to hold the pressure, and any dog that avoids that or doesn't stay there when he needs to is not a strong dog. I use that criteria when I'm selecting a pup. Any pup that I start, he has to have those three things. He has to want to drive and hold, and he has to have strength. He has to show me that he's got his tail down and he can walk into livestock. Any pup that doesn't take ground when you introduce him to sheep, he's not the sort of pup I like. Most pups fall into about three categories. They they want to run and chase, or they want to arc and hold, or they want to drive and hold. And I like that third category. I like them to take charge of their sheep. I like a pup that takes ground off his sheep. And I find that if a dog, although he looks pretty, a pup that arcs and holds and doesn't step towards his sheep probably is not the pup for me.
What advice would you give to someone purchasing their first pup or dog?
That's pretty easy. Have a look at the mother and the father. Don't believe what people tell you. Don't believe what you read. Decide what sort of work you want to do, and have a look at the mother and the father. And if they don't do the work that you want or would expect that pup to do, don't buy the pup. Picking a pup, I get asked everywhere I go, how do you pick a pup? Sometimes I pick my pups 12 months before they're born. The mother and the father and the close-up ancestors in that pedigree are the most important criteria to picking a pup. So, you know, if like I said before earlier, apples don't fall far from the tree. If you want a particular type of dog to work in a particular style, and you look at the parents and they don't exhibit those traits, there's very little chance, unless you're a super trainer, that the pup is going to do that for you.
Talking about training there, like how much influence, like obviously, you know, you said before, you never see a dog at a trial and will pick it. You always want to see it at work and whatnot. From what I'm gathering, you want to see more of a natural dog rather than a dog that you're training. You did mention a good temperament before, but you want to see something more natural than trainable.
Yeah, training is really, it's just about respect. And if you've got a well-bred pup and you have his respect and he has yours, he's easy to train. If the pup has lesser skills and it's hard to win his respect, he's hard to train. But I have very few failures with pups I keep. And if it's probably my fault if I have a failure with them, but if training to me is just all about respect, and I can usually tell if a trainer has the respect of his dogs and what sort of respect that is, whether it's a respect from fear or respect from like.
Yeah.
Are there any particular traits you'd like to put into your line moving forward?
Oh, I'd like them to be perfect. Anybody who's bred livestock of any description knows that there's no such thing as the perfect animal. I always admire the traits of many other dogs, but I don't necessarily want to change what I've got. The dogs that I have now suit me temperament-wise and work-wise, and I don't believe in changing or veering too far off course with whatever I'm breeding. I like to strive to breed something that I like and do my best and endeavour to succeed.
Got a question here from Chris Egan. Can I please have Toss? Mate, we spoke a lot about your breeding and your pups, mate. How do you go about starting a pup?
I like to show the puppies early, have a look at sheep, but when they actually start to work and show me the little traits that I can use later on in their training, I usually put them away then. I don't. Once upon a time, I'd like to train them as much as I could, as often as I could, get them broken in as quick as I could. But these days, I don't know whether I'm getting smarter or lazier, but I like the pups to see sheep and show me things I like, and I don't give them much opportunity to work. I like to take them with me. I like to have them around me and get used to me and know me. And and then at 6 or 7 months, I'll usually start their training, and that just starts with a few quiet sheep, and I start in a smaller area where I've got control of the sheep and the dog, and once they can handle those sheep, I'll take them out to the paddock and let them follow me around with the sheep. And if you have respect, the pup respects you, and you respect the pup, and you can call him off sheep outside. It's not long before you can take him to work, and it's just training on the job then.
Do you have any expectations at 6 or 7 months, or do you just try and put your expectations to the side and take it for what it is?
Yeah, no. People often say to me, "Oh, this pup's not working," and my advice to them is, if he's not working, he's not doing too much wrong. I'd rather have a pup not working than one that's got faults that I don't like in a pup. I'll give him a chance to start working and show me what he's got, and if I see little weaknesses, I'll try and help him. And if I see strengths, I'll try and build on them and try and help him if he's got it. Most pups are left or right-handed, the same as you or I. Yeah. So they have a strong side and a weak side, and if you work on the weaker side, it sometimes can become almost their stronger side. If you take away the favourite side for a little bit, they can compensate and even up. And yeah, so training is just but training is more about identifying the traits you have and how to use them. A lot of people try to make a silk purse out of a sow's ear, and with lots of bells and whistles that look pretty fancy, but the dog needs to be able to do those things without the bells and whistles. I'm not, don't class myself as a great trainer. I sometimes let the dogs do the talking for me.
Question here from Tom Brody. How much training do you do with a pup before putting them into a work situation, and what age does this commonly happen?
I like to have nice sides on a puppy. Like I say, I like to start them at 6 or 7 months old, and I'll take them through to about 10 months old, just getting a nice stop and sides, and not much more than that. As long as I've got a nice call on them, can call them to me. That's the most important thing. And then I'll start giving them, at say 10 months, light jobs around the place, bringing in sheep. I'll muster them up. I never ask a young dog to cast out with older dogs or things like that. Always, casting to me is a very important trait, that you need to spend more time with young dogs and don't have them running out with older dogs and things like that. I like to have plenty of time to teach cast outside on a mob and things like that. But as far as bringing sheep in, and it's very easy to me to, once I've got the basics on my pups, to take them to work and know that I'm not going to get into too much trouble with them. So about 10 months is I usually like to have them started in just general light duties.
What age do you find that commonly happens, or just varies with each dog?
It varies with each dog. Some pups are more mature at 10 months than others. It's a bit like yard work. I don't like to rush the pups into yard work. Old Jack Body once said to me, if the dog can't get the sheep in the yard, he's never going to be my yard dog for me. So he more or less said, well, you know, anyone can have a bloody yard dog, but not everybody can get the sheep in the yard. So, and I've sort of stuck to that a little bit. I see people shut all the gates and hound the sheep and say that's good work. Well, I like to be able to put them in the yard nicely first with a pup, and then teach him a bit of yard work.
Good question here from Ryan Johnson. Just in general, do you believe that the Kelpie working dogs are headed in the right direction? Do you believe that dogs today are as good as or better than where they used to be? Just in general.
In general, there's more Kelpies than there used to be.
Yeah.
But there's not more better ones, I can assure you. when I started out, there was teams of very good Kelpies, Ted Gavey, Jack Body, Frank Scanlon, had teams of superior Kelpies than a lot that I see today. There's good Kelpies around today, but there's not the number of elite dogs that when I started there were plenty of dogs that I would call elite dogs around size that I could take bitches to, but I find that today I struggle to find dogs that I would use in a breeding program, and that's only a personal thing. There's plenty of good dogs around. Don't get me wrong. I'm not detracting from the quality of the dogs, but just from a personal point of view, I think there's probably more superior dogs around when I first started.
And you mentioned Mac before, so he'd be one of those elite dogs. Well, can you name any, or would you like to talk about any of the others?
Mac was a very good dog, and to me, the most influential dog for my line of dogs anyway. He wasn't perfect, but I've never had one that was. But Mac was a great. He set me on the path to breed that type of dog that had that ability to come in and cover and hold, and it was a very strong dog. He was by a dog called Marker. It was a really nice dog too. And out of Kay was a great little bitch. She won, I don't know, at least one National Kelpie trial anyway, but she was a very, very nice bitch. So he was bred nicely. He probably had his faults too, but like I said, he passed on a lot of very good traits, and I was lucky enough to have an elite daughter by him, and she was very influential in the Kelpie breed. So there were plenty of good dogs around, like Glenlogie Rex. Glenville Tex was a very good dog, and Ted Rutland had a pack of very good Kelpies, big, upstanding, nice types of dogs, and really good work dogs. So there were plenty of good of those older sires, but if I was to pick one that was the most influential dog for the Kelpies, the Kelpies that I like coming through, I couldn't go past Barrenbogie Mac.
Yep.
Question here from Amanda Dunbar. Do you think there are less elite dogs because people give up on them too early, or because we rely more on motorbikes than dogs for long distance paddock work?
I'm sure that back when I first started with dogs, and that's a long time ago, I sort of, people did everything with their dogs on farms. There was no motorbikes, and horses, yes, but and all the work was done with dogs. So dogs got a lot more chance to display their wares, and there were a lot more stockmen who really had to rely on the dog. So they were a different type of dog than what you see today. A lot of the dogs today are like ute or motorbike dogs, just different dogs, and I guess it's horses for courses. We must move with the times, but I'm sure that's the reason there's not more better dogs around today than there used to be.
How much time do you put into training? Is most of it done on the job, or you spoke before about, you take a dog back out when it's 6 or 7 months? But do you want to, can you elaborate on that for us a little bit, please?
I don't do a lot of training. I seem to these days have a lot of other things going on. So, but I like quality time with pups. I like to see every time I take a pup into the training pen, I like to see a little step forward in his training. It's not how much time; it's how good a quality time you spend with that pup. If I've sort of learnt that rather than spend have a lot of lessons, long lessons, short lessons where you can advance on what you did the time before are much more beneficial.
So I just read another question in, but just on that there, sometimes you hear like it's one step forward, two steps back. You believe that's from a bit of overtraining and high expectations?
Yeah, if you're having problems with a pup at some stage, if he's doing things that he wasn't doing when you started him, probably better not look at the pup. You're probably doing it yourself. So yeah. Have a good look at what you're doing. And sometimes pups will get that. If a pup hits a spot where he's losing interest, my advice is, take him away from the training and take him with you and take him out fencing and give him another job. Don't persist with training and make him a slave to training. I like to have. I don't like a dog to pull me along on the lead, but I like a dog that wants to pull me along into that training pen. I know when I get there, if the dog is in the right frame of mind, if I've got to drag him into the pen, I'm probably not going to let him go. Quite often I'll take a pup in to start training, and if his attitude's not right, I'll just walk around through the sheep and I won't let him off the lead. We'll just have a bit of time there and watch the sheep, and I'll call him over to me and sit him and give him a pat and take him away. Because if his attitude's not right and you let him go and he doesn't do what you want, you're putting yourself in a situation where you'll have a confrontation with the pup. And like I said, training is about respect. And if he loses that respect for you, or you lose respect for him, it'll put your training back. So try and keep your training to a minimum, and try and make a little step forward every time. And if you can't, at least finish where you were last time without putting too much pressure on the pup.
So what is feel for you, and how does that come out across in a dog?
Feel something that only the dog has or hasn't. Like if you've got a couple of wild sheep, you'll soon see whether your dog's got feel for livestock or not. If you send him out to get them and they run and jump over the fence into the neighbours, well, he hasn't got the feel for a sheep. But most pups will, if they're not confined to too small an area when you start to train them, they'll have a nice distance, and they'll have a distance that influences the sheep. And like I said before, I don't like a pup that doesn't step towards his sheep. So if that pup doesn't want to influence the sheep to come to me, then he's not the pup for me. He looks pretty and people think he's that's a beautiful pup. Look how he heads and holds. But if he doesn't step towards his sheep and want to do something with those sheep, then I'd rather someone else trained him, because I can make a more useful dog out of that one that runs and chases or holds and drives than I can out of that arcing dog that heads and doesn't step towards his sheep.
Very well. And got me thinking now. I'm going to have 100 questions about that later, but for now, we'll keep going, please.
A question here from Ken Gardner. Do you have a preference on working either dogs or bitches, and why?
No, I don't. I've had a success with bitches, and I've had success with dogs as far as trials are concerned. And I've had great working bitches and dogs that did the work at home. And bitches, I find, are very, how can you put it? They're very loyal, and I really think that probably they're probably more consistent than dogs. Dogs, like people, I suppose, have other things on their mind sometimes. But a bitch, I've had some really nice bitches that always gave you 100% and never were distracted by anything. And I've had some really good dogs that sometimes they were put off by some of the surroundings and things. And yeah, I think probably bitches might be a bit more level-headed than dogs sometimes.
How about just having a few different dogs around the home? Like, how do you find that works with your pack, having, several dogs around? Do you find it at some time like that testosterone, I think I got that word wrong, but anyways, you might get the idea, levels get a bit up there, and how do you go about handling that?
Yeah, they do. Dogs are, well, everybody sort of realises they're a pack animal, and so I all my dogs get to run together every few days. They get to run in the big yard, and I don't allow any fighting. They have to get on with one another, and that I like to put the older dogs in with those young dogs and see how the older dogs teach them respect.
Yeah.
The boss dog will usually you put him in the yard there. He doesn't like going in because he doesn't have to go in the yard anyway. He knows he can do what he likes, but he'll sit there and the more submissive dogs will come up and want to lick his face and want him to play, and if he's tolerant, he'll just get along with them. But I never like bullies or dogs that are aggressive towards other dogs, and I try and instill that in them when they're puppies. I don't like puppies fighting over food. So if I've got a bully in a litter of pups, I always take it away and feed it separately.
Yeah.
Question here from Pete Rutherford. What are your thoughts on repeat matings? For example, what were you looking for when repeating the Glenfarber Kenny and Katie joining several times?
There was a time when I'd never do a repeat mating. I was of the opinion that you always got the best progeny from the first mating of two, but then as I got a little bit older and a little bit wiser, I realised there wasn't a lot of difference, and the genetics were the same. So if I did a mating that worked and I liked the progeny, I like to try and back it up. And I got a couple of very good dogs out of the first Kenny Katie mating, and when I joined the second time, I got Sophie. So that's the proof of the pudding. There's no difference in. I would have argued with people 20 years ago that you should never do the same mating again, but I wasn't very smart then. I'm pretty smart now.
Here we go. I'm going to put a bit of a spin on it, right? Do you say, for example, you got a couple and they're younger and they have a child, and then when they're older and they have another child, they're a bit more experienced and they've been there before and they might be a little bit wiser. Do you see any difference in breeding dogs that are older? Like if you were to do a repeat mating further down the track, do you see a difference in the pups compared to the pups of the first one?
No, not really. I agree with what you said because I'm a much better grandfather than I was a father. But yeah, no, I reckon I don't see a lot of difference. I think sometimes people tell me that as dogs get older, they lose their potency and the progeny aren't as good. I haven't experienced that, and I've used like that boss semen that's 15, 16 years old, and I considered Pride a good dog from semen from an old dog that's 15 years on since it was collected. So yeah.
Question here from Rebecca Cooper. How do you go about training the pup that is maybe too keen to move her cattle and gets in too tight?
Yeah, that's a good question. With cattle, I've got pretty hard, fast rules with young dogs and cattle. I don't like introducing my dogs to cattle till they're 10 or 11 months old. I've had too many nice pups that have had injuries, or I've even lost them by putting them on cattle too early. I like to get a good handle on my pups before I put them on cattle. I like to be able to stop them and move them so that they don't get in a situation where they get hurt. And I always start my young dogs on weaner cattle. They're learning and the pup's learning, and there's a few kicks and a few bites and everything's worked out fine. But if you put young dogs on experienced cattle, it's a recipe for disaster. The young dogs don't understand that cattle don't mean to just palm you off, they mean to kill you. So it's to me, very important that you start young dogs on young cattle and you get a good handle on them. They learn to handle their cattle and stay out of that zone where they can get injured and be able to be put in when they need to be in a safe situation. But young dogs tend to run alongside fences behind cattle and get kicked, and all sorts of things that if you put them in a situation with calves, young weaner cattle, they can do that, and it's not life-threatening. But always remember that you've got a long time in front of you with the dog. It pays to be cautious when you start them and give them every opportunity to reach their potential.
So how long have you been trialling for?
I think I went to my first trial about 1970 something. Too long ago to remember. Yeah, I've been trialling for a while anyway.
And why do you trial, mate? What got you hooked?
Oh, I always, like I said, I always a bit dog mad, so I liked to go out and have a crack at something different. So I started to do a few trials, and I was lucky that I came along on the scene when yard trialling and utility trialling was kicking off. So it became I really enjoyed. I started off doing a few 3-sheep trials, which I wasn't very good at, and so I got a bit of a hammering early on, but it didn't hurt me. It made me have a good look at my dogs and how I handle them, and look for a little different type of dog. And so, like I said, I started trialling when yard trials and utility trials started up. So it was good to see how they developed and how the dogs developed, and I reckon they were early on. They improved the standard of dog handlers and dogs right across the Tablelands area here tenfold in a few years. When I went for the first organised yard trial, I think there were only 3 dogs there that actually get up on the backs of sheep, and they weren't proficient backers by any means. I had one of them, and it was a bit of a circus, a trick that I taught him. But it really helped. There's a lot of young people there who I saw develop into really good handlers, and their dogs develop, and it's been very satisfying to me to see how the utility trials and yard trials developed the handler skills of a lot of people.
How did yard trialing kick off, mate? What was the thought behind that?
Oh, I think people like me probably got a bit of a caning from 3-sheeping. So they decided, to try and look for a more practical trial that farmer could bring his old dog in. That was the thing that really struck me, is that I saw a lot of farmers there that just brought their farm dog into when we first started yard trialling, and got around, and they were ecstatic. They thought it was pretty good that they could actually go to a dog trial and get the sheep around. So yeah, I'm not sure of who had the first trial or where it was or whatever, but I know Armidale and Burrawa and myself had a couple of trials at Trunky Creek and Burrick that I've been reminded of by some of my older friends. One particular, the first one we had at Trunky Creek, the back gate on the benching race wasn't all that good. And every time I see this particular mate, he reminds me of how his dog would have won if the gate hadn't come off. So. But things have improved a little since then, and that's going back a fair few years ago. So I think that the yard trialling and utility trialling certainly saw a great step forward in dog handling and dog skills, and with the younger generation especially.
Is there a favourite trial you have to participate in?
Favourite trial. I guess I like my local trials, but I like going up to Armidale. I started off up there with a bit of success. I took Lucky up and won a novice up there, and that's probably among my best wins, I reckon. I won the first really. I learnt that I could be competitive, and not because I had skill, but she had skill. The sheep that particular time, I think it was 1984, and the sheep were very hard to get off the truck. They had a truck and it was loaded very tightly, and you had to bring them down a pretty steep little ramp, and they just didn't want to come off. And I was pretty green and I didn't have a lot of stock sense, but Lucky did, fortunately. And I sent her into the truck, and I was standing at the gate, and I only just had it open, and she came up and top knotted the sheep that was looking out, and my sheep ran off the truck, and that was more or less what won me the trial. But it wasn't my skill; it was hers. I was pretty nervous and dry in the mouth, but as long as I kept the gates open, she kept the sheep going. So that was one of a trial that I rated among probably my most memorable.
Talking about winning the novice at Armidale, you were lucky enough to do that again last year with Katie.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us about her 2 novice wins that she's had, mate?
Yeah, that's right. She's probably one of very, very few dogs that will probably emulate her accomplishments, having won 2 Australian novices. But when bringing that up, she works exactly the same as Glenlogie Lucky. She's a carbon copy of the work style of Mac and Lucky, and 20 odd years on, that gives me a lot of satisfaction to be able to see those traits still in my dogs.
That's fantastic, and it goes back to, and hats off to your breeding program as well.
Well, like I said, I don't claim to be a great breeder or anything, and I've never ever set out to breed dogs commercially. I've always only ever wanted to breed dogs for myself. I never did a mating that I didn't consider was good enough to keep pups myself. I didn't do the mating sort of thing. So yeah.
What do you feel is your greatest achievement so far?
Well, I don't know. I think probably my family's my greatest achievement. All my babies and their babies. But as far as dogs are concerned, just having had some nice dogs, and I've got a lot of good memories there, and I really I like my dogs, and I've had some special dogs that I had a connection with, and I'm pretty. That's probably the greatest achievement I could say. That I've had dogs that I respected and they respected me.
When you started out, you mentioned you were young there, and was there anyone that stood out for you and inspired you to one with dogs, but then 2 to trial?
Yeah, I liked quite a few. Jack Body was a great handler, and he really loved his dogs. I reckon if I came back as a dog, I'd want to be one of Jack. He actually sewed blanket inside the collars of his dogs so they wouldn't rub their necks.
Oh wow!
Things like that. He was a lovely handler of dogs, a very kind man, and had lovely, big, upstanding, strong dogs. Ted Gaby was another really good handler with good dogs. And yeah, well, fellas like Steve Wayman, really good handler and had some good dogs. There's lots of good handlers. Johnny White, people that I looked up to.
Is there something that you see handlers struggle with, and where do you believe they can improve?
Yeah, I struggle with watching some people work dogs because I'm of that mould that's very hard to change. And what some people consider good work these days, I don't. And so I struggle to come to grips with the way some people work their dogs. And on livestock, I think you need to have an appreciation for what you're working and have respect for your livestock. And sometimes, unfortunately, I find it hard to see the way some people work their dogs and treat their livestock.
Have you noticed a change in the way people handle their dogs and livestock? Like you mentioned there that you don't like to see it because you know you don't like the way they treat it. But have you seen a shift in recent years?
There's less skilled stockmen today than there used to be. There's more people who don't read their stock as well. I think that's
What
just
do you think
a
the cause
personal
of that?
opinion. Oh, I think probably everybody's in a hurry these days.
Yeah.
So rather than work their stock, they're forcing their stock to move faster than. I see plenty of videos of people working cattle and the cattle are trotting or running. That to me is not good stockmanship. You should be able to go out and muster your cows up, and they should walk back to the yard, not trot or run. And just things like that. I guess I'm probably old and cranky, but things like that I don't appreciate.
While we're down that line, is there a message you'd like to get out into the livestock industry?
I'm probably not one to give messages to the livestock industry.
Or your own opinion, like whether it be, you know, treating your stock better or about your dogs or.
Yeah, I just think that livestock handling generally is probably not as well taught these days as it should be. People don't work their stock as well as they should. Like I said, but these days people always seem to be in a hurry when they go to do something. So
Yep.
I guess that probably reflects on the way they handle their stock.
You think that reflects on the way they handle their dogs as well, and the way they could possibly look after their dogs?
Exactly. Yeah. And people in a hurry, like people get in a hurry with their dogs. That's the thing that I think that I see the most. They expect too much from immature dogs. A dog really needs to grow up and like a child, he needs to mature and grow into a young adult without too much pressure to fulfill his potential.
Away from dogs, is there a hobby or talent no one really knows about?
No, I haven't got many talents. I'm probably pretty good with electronics and things like that, as Daniel would probably know. No, I'm not. I hate computers.
I was going to say, it's not with picking a football team, I can tell you that.
No, everybody makes fun of me. I've got extensive records for my sheep and my cattle, and I still carry that notebook with me and write things down. And I've got notebooks full of pedigrees and things. And people say, "Oh, why don't you put it on the computer? And why don't you do this?" But yeah, I'm just, like I said, I'm too old now to change my ways. So yeah, no, I don't have any particular skills. I'm just I like to think that I'm a reasonable farmer and yeah, and a good neighbour and yeah.
Nah, very well. So never too old, mate. But if it's not broken, why fix it, right?
That's right.
and, and obviously, I know that you know, you haven't had a lot of exposure to dog talk, and but we've spoken about what we're doing and what we've tried to do it. Have you got any suggestions for us of, you know, things you'd like to, what we can do to, or any suggestions at all, really?
Yeah, well, like I said, I'm pretty ignorant when it comes to these sort of things. I don't, yeah, I love what you're doing here, and I probably should be following it. But yeah, I don't know. I think getting people on and getting different opinions, and yeah, getting someone else's idea is always healthy. Nobody has got all the answers. There's no such a thing as a perfect dog or a perfect trainer, or I haven't met them anyway, if there is. So yeah, I think the more ideas you can get from a cross section of people, not necessarily trial people. There's plenty of good stockmen out there that would be good to interview and hear about their experiences with dogs and in real work situations and things.
Thank you.
Is there anyone you'd like to see us do a Q&A with?
Yeah, I didn't have to think long on this one. I reckon Steve Wayman would be great. Steve's a very, very knowledgeable man with dogs, and he's seen a lot of old dogs that the younger generation haven't seen, and he's had some, like he had Barambogi Mac that I rate as probably the most influential dog in the line of Kelpies that I like anyway. So I reckon Steve would be great to have on and have a yarn to.
Right, thank you. And I'm sure I've had a chat to Steve, and I'm sure I'll get into his ear a bit more. And when he's ready, he'll jump on and have a chat to us.
That'd be good.
So at that time of night, Chris, there's a few questions thrown at you there. Was there a particular question that stood out to you at all?
I like Cooper's question about the cattle, introducing that dog that wanted to get in too close and go too hard on the cattle. I think that's something that dogs that are bred for cattle probably do a little bit. They want to get in close and go a bit hard, but Rebecca needs to pull back a dog a little bit and yeah, get a little bit more handle so that she's got a little bit more handle on the dog, and not let it get in a situation where it's getting in too close and revving up the cattle too much. Just get a little bit more handle on the pup.
Well, Rebecca, send us a message and we'll get that dog food off to you.
Yep, the bag of Enduro Plus coming your way. So it's come to the pointy end of the question here, Chris. I'm sure you've been thinking about this one for the last few days, and I'll hand you over to Laura.
Would you rather fight one duck the size of a horse or 20 horses the size of ducks?
Well, that's a question that has had me baffled a little bit, but I think I'd go for the 20 dogs the size of ducks.
Well, Chris, thank you very much for your time tonight. Much appreciated. We know you're normally a bit of a modest, humble man, and keep yourself a bit. Don't like to talk about yourself. So really, thanks for the opportunity. Thanks for coming out and having a chat to us, mate. We really do appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. I enjoyed the night. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to all our listeners out there tonight.
We'd like to wish you all a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And we'll see you again on Tuesday, the 18th of January.
And remember, the day we stop learning will be a sad day for all of us. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Good night. Thank you.